Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we are going over my truck camper and things that I would honestly change if I were to rebuild this for this same camper shell. I've owned this truck now for, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I've had this camper build out, as you guys see it here, for about 2 years. I haven't been keeping track of how many nights I've slept in it, but it's gotta be pushing at least 50 to 60 nights, I would say. So I've done winter camping, summer camping, stealth camping, you know, you name it. I've done all sorts of camping. I've done longer road trips with it. I've traveled all the way down to southern Florida from Tennessee in it, doing camping along the way. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of how this build out works and functions. So I want to go over today, if I were to rebuild this for this camper shell, what I would do different. So the first thing I want to change on this build is this kitchen drawer. So it's obviously really long, holds all of the kitchen stuff with room to spare, which is great. As far as how the dimensions are of it, I don't think I would change that. I could potentially drop the height of it down a little bit, which would drop the whole bed down a bit, but we'll get into that. The issue I'm having is if I'm like stealth camping especially, and I'm cooking in the truck and I'm trying to not draw a ton of attention to myself, I have to remember to grab everything I could possibly need to cook a meal out of this before I jump back in, close the tailgate, close the lift glass, and then once I'm in the truck, there's no way to get access to this drawer again. So if I forget a spoon or seasoning or a plate or something, I have to jump back out, grab everything. Where I'm going with this is I wish that I had built an access point above the kitchen drawer that I could basically reach in and grab things from inside the truck. That would be probably the biggest thing that I would change on this thing. And for a good reason. I did something similar to the back, and I could have easily done it with this. And I think it'll make more sense when I show you the next thing that I would change. But if I were to make a cutout here, it would kind of intrude on the depth of this, because I would have to create a way to make a flush mount opening. So that way when, you know, I wouldn't want to put hinges on top of the bed, because then my feet would be hitting the hinges. And so I'd have to do some sort of a flush mount opening where I could get access to the drawer from inside the truck. So I know that is maybe a little bit difficult to explain or understand, but that's my biggest thing, is I would honestly create some sort of opening so while I'm in the truck, everything closed, I can still get access to this kitchen drawer. But let's jump to the next thing I would definitely change if I were to remake this build. So hopping up into the truck, I want to point out the next item that needed to be fixed or changed is, let me move. This is like my new little portable desk that I got for the truck. I found it at Goodwill. It's like an aluminum all metal folding desk thing, so you can move these arms to basically swing it out and create a desk. Haven't totally figured out how to use this in here yet, but I think it's going to be a nice addition. So underneath the bed here, let me just move this out of the way so we can clearly see this. So similar to what I'd want to do with the kitchen drawer, so I have access, is I have this little opening here, which I can just totally pull out. And that gives me access to the storage that's underneath the bed, which runs to about here to here, and the back of the drawer to the back of the truck bed, the headboard. So my issue with this is it's never broken on me, but the way I made this sit flush, so that way when I'm sleeping, this is flush and there's no raised, like I said, hinges or anything on here. It's just a nice flush fit. However, the issue is the way I accomplish that is by adding some smaller pieces of plywood to the underside of this on both sides here. And it works. But the issue is, if you were to sit directly on this, it really puts a lot of stress on it. And I don't think if I were to continuously sit on this all the time and put my weight on here, that it wouldn't break. So having it full of stuff helps, because then it kind of adds extra support to this lid from, you know, pushing all the way through. But, you know, I think there's probably a better way to do this. And I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe adding the same trim that I've added here to all 4 sides would probably help. But I'm trying to think of better ways to do this in the future when I go to rebuild this whole setup, but definitely something I would change. And honestly, I'd probably make this cutout even bigger because like getting my mattress out of here is a pretty tight fit. So I have to make sure that this mattress is like totally deflated and there's as much air out of it so that way I can actually roll it up as tight as possible to get it in here. Now, given I didn't have this mattress when I first built this truck camper, so, I didn't know. And this cabinetry works great, or this cubby works great for all sorts of other stuff. I mean, I have the mattress, a blanket, an awning for the truck. I've got another sleeping bag. I've got a pillow. I've got a hammock. I've got a sheet. And then obviously the mattress. So it holds a lot of stuff, and it's been super clutch to utilize more spots within this camper shell build. But it's the little things that I don't find out until after using the entire setup for 2 years. And obviously the camera won't pick this up, but if I were to sit on this, it won't break, especially with the mattress being in there and it's nice and full. But if it wasn't full and it was just these two supports on the sides holding up the this removable portion, there's chances it would break. It's just not as sturdy as I would like it to be. So point number 2, I would change the size of this opening, again, just to make accessing things easier, and then also changing how it's supported from underneath, so that way it's a little bit more sturdy. When I built this wooden setup, I thought the best thing to do, and I still think the best thing to do, is to add a floor to this, which is basically 2 pieces. I traced the bed mat onto a piece of plywood, cut it out, and then cut that piece of plywood in half so I didn't have to stick the whole thing in all at once. I could stick the first end in and then butt this end up against it, so it's a 2-piece floor. What I would change here is the width of the plywood that I used and possibly even the material. Why the floor is good? For 2 reasons. One, it allows me to basically screw the side rails of the bed and the headboard and everything else into the floor, so it's really sturdy. I mean, I can shake the whole truck and nothing moves because it's all grounded into the floor, and the floor is cut with such precision that it, without screws or any mounting points, just sits super tight in between the sides of the bed, and it doesn't move at all. That portion's great. The other reason it's good is if you are familiar with actually most truck beds, but the first gen Tacoma, if you were to look under here, there's ridges on the bed. And so what that does is having the wood on top allows for airflow underneath because it's sitting on top of those ridges. So there's maybe a 1-inch gap in between each ridge. So that's why you could maybe see that it's raised off the actual bed a little bit, again, because it's sitting on those ridges. Now that's good because it helps with condensation output. So if things are dripping down, it's going to drip into here eventually and then just air out or, fall out of the truck. That's nice. However, what I would change is probably the width of the plywood used here. I want to say this is 1/2-inch ply, and I just don't think it needs to be 1/2-inch. I mean, the space in here is pretty limited. So you need to maximize as much of it as possible. And I think using thinner plywood would be nice, or even potentially a totally different material. And if I were to do this over again, I would either use maybe 1/4-inch plywood, and then I would have to figure out a pretty creative way to actually screw that into the 1/4-inch more thin plywood, because it wouldn't be quite as sturdy at these points because you don't have as much, meat on that wood to actually drill into or screw your bed rails into. However, if there's a will, there's a way. So reducing the width of this piece of ply I know it's minuscule, but it would give you a little more space in here. And every inch freaking counts. Every 1/4 inch counts when you're working in a space this small. The other idea I had would be to, again, use thinner wood, but only run it maybe to here and then have this open. Since I used to have cabinetry on this side before I had a fridge in here, which was useful in its own aspect. But once I decided I needed some sort of refrigerator or, at least a larger cooler to be able to keep food for longer trips. The only good place to put this was right here. So I had to get rid of the cabinetry that was on this side. And where I'm going with this is I would potentially end the floor here, reduce the width of the plywood for the floor from here to here. And, that would drop the bed down a little bit. And like I said in the first point, I could probably shorten this drawer based on how much stuff I keep in the kitchen drawer now. I know I have about an inch and a half of extra space that I could reduce this by. So dropping this down, dropping the floor down a little bit, you might end up with a bed about here, but that makes a world of a difference, and I'll show you. If I'm sitting up in here, I can't sit up straight, but I can, comfortably hunch, if you will. So being down another inch and a half would probably allow me to sit up entirely straight. It would just be nice. And so obviously I'm going to be redoing this whole setup once I get the Go Fast camper. And I'm going to be using probably different materials entirely from wood. So something I'm going to be changing is the height of all of this to maximize the amount of space and headroom I have up here. And now, speaking of space, that brings me to my fourth point, which would be the amount of space in between here and here. Once I got the fridge, and this isn't my first fridge, but this is the fridge I've chosen to keep for the long term, at least for now. It's a little bit wider, takes up more space this way than my other fridge. And it's good because I can hold more food, keep things nice and cool. Also, this fridge, I just really like the stainless on it. I like how quiet it is when the compressor's running. So when I'm asleep in here at night, it's, the compressor turns on every now and then. The last fridge I had was a bit loud, and it would sometimes wake me up when the compressor came on. This one is extremely quiet and is more energy efficient. So for multiple reasons, I like this fridge. The one thing I don't like, the width of it. I almost wish it was more tall and less wide to fit the same amount of stuff, but beggars can't be choosers. So my issue here is that this space between here, the hallway for my house, is quite narrow. As you saw, I can't even fit my shoe this way, so I have to sit kind of like this if I'm sitting over here. Sometimes I was using this as a desk top or a place to work before I had this little device, but it's just so uncomfortable to sit like that. So my feet are doing this, and I'm also hunched over because of the height of the drawer and the floor. It's just not it's a recipe for uncomfort. So I think I would also reduce the size of the bed. And I know I'm really pushing towards minimizing this drawer space, but I think there's room to give. I have had this kitchen drawer filled with stuff that I use, that I need, and I've kind of pulled stuff out that I thought would be nice to have, but I ended up never using it. So right now, this drawer is pretty much, after 2 years, maximized for what I actually need in a kitchen drawer. And now I know that there's a little bit of extra space in here that I can get rid of. And so I would not only drop the drawer this way, but I'd probably bring the bed in this way. And if I can show you, laying down on the bed, it's plenty wide. I mean, if I were to hug up against this wall, I have so much room here, and I just honestly don't need it. So if I were to scale back the width of the bed and the drawer, that would buy me some more room here, making this hallway a little bit more manageable and easy to maneuver between. And it's just the little things, guys. I promise, once you're out there and you're using it a bunch, there's a lot of good about this setup, but there's also some stuff that needs to get changed. So I'm going to move on to the fifth point of how I would change this camper build if I were to redo it again. This little cubby here has been great to store all sorts of stuff. I've got a broom, I've got a fire extinguisher, which I need to mount in a better place so it's more accessible, bungees, first aid kit, hatchet, wood blocks to level the truck at camp. I've got all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I put a fishing pole in here. However, if I stack a bunch of stuff in here, there's still room. There's still room where this could all be tucked in and pushed over. So again, where I'm getting at with this is reducing the width of this, which would bring this whole thing over more. So again, just adding more space to this side. The other thing I need to change is similar to the kitchen drawer, is if you look up top here, it's just, there's no access points to anywhere on there. So the actually only unusable space on this whole thing is behind the wheel arch in this cubby. So this cubby, there's no dividers, goes all the way to the back of the bed. You do have the wheel arch in there. So I can't put, a 6-foot thing totally through. A fishing pole will work because it's a tiny fishing pole, so it will stretch over that wheel arch. But having access to back there, similar, like right behind the bed cubby, there's a whole bunch of unused space. There's probably 1.5 feet of length and probably, this much height, about 1 foot of height that's not being used. And so adding a cutout, again, similar to that one, and what I would want to do with the kitchen drawer, but adding a cutout to be able to get access to even here, and then also in the back there. I've just never, that would be such a good place for little stuff. It'd be a great place for clothes, for cables, for all sorts of stuff, because I do work from the road, having computer cables, hard drive cables, all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's just unused space back there. And again, with a limited amount of room in a camper build like this, truck bed camper, every freaking spot counts. So you want to be able to use it all. And that's probably the 5 biggest changes that I would make to this build if I were to do it again. Now, moving forward, we are basically at November now. I'm filming this on October 30th. My GFC should be here. My Go Fast camper shell should be here in the next month, which I am so unbelievably excited for. I understand that it takes a long time to build these campers by hand, which GFC does, and I totally respect that. Hiring U.S. labor, doing it all the materials in the U.S., but I understand sometimes that leads to longer wait times. So I've been trying to be really patient. I think I ordered the GFC back in July. I want to say it was July. So it's about July, August, September, October, November, about a 5-month wait. So I've been trying to be extremely patient, and it's given me a lot of time to evaluate this truck camper build as far as the wood goes and kind of pick and choose what needs to stay and what needs to go. But I really can't make those final decisions until I get rid of this fiberglass shell and get the GFC on the truck. And then I can sit in here and really understand how much more or potentially less room I have. I believe that the GFC is going to buy me about the same headroom as I have here, but it doesn't taper like this one does. If you look at the side of this fiberglass shell from the side of the truck, it starts taller and then reduces. So up by the cab, it's actually shorter. So I should have some more usable space in the GFC as far as the cab portion goes. Obviously, it's going to have a pop-up tent. So this bed setup is really not as necessary. I mean, it'll be good for like stealth camping when I'm in a parking lot and I don't want to have my actual tent popped on the GFC, and I'll just be sleeping down in the cap portion of it. So I basically, right now, I'm in kind of holding mode until the GFC gets here before I really start tearing this out and creating new plans. But I wanted to identify the things that needed to change. So moving forward, I'll give you a little insight here for sticking around to this part in the video. The fridge, I think, needs to be rearranged. I'm hoping that the GFC buys me more room this way and it doesn't taper in as much, because I want to be able to lift the fridge up higher and probably put it on a slide, so that way when I'm not stealth camping and I'm just at camp doing my thing all comfy, I can slide the whole fridge out and it will sit here, which will make getting access to food when I'm outside of the truck a lot easier, because right now I can get in here, but it's a real reach and I'm kind of blindly just trying to feel for what I'm looking for in the fridge. So being able to put it on slides and have it come out here and then open it and be able to actually see what's in the fridge be a lot better. Let's see, what else is there? Because I know there's more. I spoke about materials, especially for the floor. So for the GFC build, I'm really hoping to, I know it's going to be a little bit more time consuming, less cost effective, but it should also shed some weight and also probably maximize how much space I can use in here. I want to build the next version of this out of extruded aluminum for the framing, and then if I can swing it, I'd love to do aluminum composite panels to basically be acting as this portion, the top here, possibly even the floor. And doing that would be nice, because if I could add gasketing around between the extruded aluminum and the panels. I understand this is probably hard for me to explain through the camera, but once we get to the build series, make sure you stick around for that. It'll make a lot more sense. But if I was able to add gasketing and really make this thing watertight, so it's nothing but aluminum composite, and rubber gasketing, hypothetically, I could hose down everything in here after a dusty wheeling trip, and everything that's in the cabinetry, in the drawer, in the cubby would not get wet because it's all sealed and watertight. I would love for that to be a thing. Plus, the lightweightness, the reduced weight of using aluminum over half-inch plywood, I think is beneficial and will pay off over the long term with fuel economy, all that stuff. The goal for this is to make it as lightweight, as functional, and honestly as modular as possible. Sometimes I need to use this truck bed, and so if I can figure out a way to make this, I don't know, a little more removable if I need to, that would be great. So I think for the GFC, new materials, more lightweight, reduce the size of things. I'll have the tent camper portion, so I'll be sleeping down here far less often because I definitely do regular camping more than I do stealth camping. And most of the time, the places I'm camping at, you can absolutely pop the tent. You're not trying to be, discreet. So I'll be sleeping up there most of the time, which just reduces the value of this bed setup a lot. So very excited to get the GFC here and start going over the plans. And then I will be getting rid of this camper shell. It'll be up for sale at some point. It's been nice to have it, but as you guys know, I don't love it, and I'm really excited for the GFC. So I'm hoping, another thing, I know I'm going off and on. The GFC, I'm assuming is going to be about 250 to 260 pounds. I don't know, and this thing is heavy, but I do not know the exact weight. So the plan is when the GFC, I get the call that it's ready for pickup and I can go head out and do that, I'm going to head over to one of the scales in town. I'm going to fill up the gas tank, keep all my gear in here as I would have it normally. I'm going to check the weight of the truck and see what the difference is going to be after I get the GFC on. And then I can hopefully, through that math, figure out if the GFC is more lightweight or more heavy than the fiberglass shell. So weight's a big thing and space is a big thing for moving forward with this rig. And I hope there was some insight in there for you guys. I'm excited to do some more camping in this thing before the GFC gets here. I've got a few weeks to go, so we'll be pushing the limits with this fiberglass shell and the current setup for the next close to a month, and stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much, especially those of you that stuck around to this part of the video. I know it's a bit more, not as interesting perhaps as camping, but I think if you're interested in building your own rig, there's hopefully some insightful stuff in here. So thank you guys. I will see you in the next one. Comments below. Make sure you leave a thumbs up if you liked it. And keep elevating, friends. I love you. Adios.